So when you give me a nod, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, when you look at digital transformation, obviously, it's the buzzword. Everyone's talking about it. And, this image that you see on the right is typically what you think of, right? AI, touching screens. And, that's what our lives have become as well. Whether it is through the phones that we use, through the media that we consume, it's all digitized and everything is in the digital world. But essentially, if you just break it down into what digital transformation really is, it's nothing but an integration of all digital technology that's available to all of us, and that's all there is to it. Now, what makes it more complicated or makes it more challenging for anybody to kind of go through this journey is there needs to be a certain shift in the way you're doing business. So especially, there are two kinds of companies you would see. One, which is a pure play digital company. Now, when it's a pure play digital company, there is no transformation there because they've kind of, they are a digital company. So they've kind of, grown in that. However, there are companies which have existed for decades. And, for longer than we have been on this planet. And they need to pivot. They need to change. They need to change the way they do business. They need to change the way they do things. And that basically comes down to a very, very basic thing, which is the culture. So any transformation, we are speaking about digital transformation, but, individually, if any of us have had any experiences, any transformation requires a certain shift in the culture or a certain acceptance of change in the culture that needs to be kind of ingrained. So that's essentially, where digital transformation kind of comes in. And usually, any transformation, again, while it's true for digital transformation as well, there needs to be a problem. If there is a problem, only then are you trying to solve it. You won't try to, break things down and try and break walls and try and make new things if everything seems to be working fine, right? So there is always a problem statement. And if you address that through digital transformation, there is an opportunity. And, there are enough and more examples, and there are some that I will talk about as we progress. But there's enough and more to talk about there. Why is it important? And, when you look at it, like I said in the previous slide, if there is a problem, you want to solve it. And if there is a problem, a lot of times these problems are quite critical, mission critical. So, there is survival at stake. And you just look at the COVID times, that you look at how our consumption has shifted over the last year and a half. Just look at, there is a very interesting visual that I have plotted. Now, some of these companies, like airlines, don't have a choice. They are suffering because you can't travel, and they can't make it more digital than they already are. But there are companies and there are industries like retail. There are industries like merchandise and e-commerce, your supermarkets. They have digitized and they are thriving, right? You look at gaming; it's thriving, and gaming was in different forms. And look at how it's evolved and how it's become so much more digitized. And has embarked into the digital transformation way early on, which has actually led to them actually being trailblazers, and they're really, really doing extremely well. You look at examples of cold storage, for instance. If you look at a brick and mortar company like a cold storage, you can now order everything from cold storage by a click of a button on Grab, and that is digital transformation. And while it looks very simple, that of course, cold storage will kind of decide to start selling on Grab or Deliveroo, but the reality is at the back of it, there is an entire shift in the way the supply chain works. There's an entire shift in the way operationally the company has to work, and all of that is what becomes, those are things that you need to kind of keep in mind when you're working through digital transformation for your organization. Now, why does that become important? Because of survival. Why does that become important? Because you don't want to be redundant, right? You want to be able to go where your consumer is. You want to be able to access your consumer. You want to be able to deliver to the needs of your consumer, and the needs of that consumer has shifted because the consumer has become more digitally savvy. And it's actually, I wouldn't even want to use the word savvy. I think we've all become a lot more digital. Like, imagine this presentation. If it was in the pre-COVID time, I'm very confident we won't be doing this on Zoom. We would be doing it face to face, right? We would be doing it, it'll huddled in a room together. And there would be a lot more physicality. But because we pivoted and we said, okay, we can't do physical meetings, we must then take the other alternative, which is doing Zoom calls. And, all of us are doing that for our work. Like, your 10-hour work, 12-hour work is all on Zoom, and it's all digital. It's all, and that's essentially digital transformation for each of us, right? That's how we individually also transform, not just in consumption, but also in terms of being able to deliver what we have to deliver in our own organization. So that's where basically digital transformation kind of comes from. Now, this is a framework that I personally find more palatable and easy and simple. While there are several frameworks. Now, when you look at digital transformation and at an organization level, when you're looking at it, the first thing you do is you identify why do you really need to transform digitally. There's a mom and pop shop need to transform and become a digital guru. Do they need to do that? So the question is, why should I do it? What is it that's either pushing me, propelling me, or what is that challenge, or what is the problem that it'll be able to solve? Because once you have that clear, everything kind of flows from there. The entire narrative kind of will come from there. The next step is obviously once you've identified what your objective is, only then can you create what your strategy needs to be. Now, while I would say this whole framework is in a certain order here, but I would always put leadership on the top, because every change that you want to make in the organization, every bit of change that you want to make, always works best when it comes from the acceptance, acknowledgement, and readiness of the top management and the leadership. So that agility to transform digitally, the agility to the willingness to say, okay, there are these things that will change. The way we behave will change. The way we access information will change. And if that acceptance, that agility is displayed by the leaders, I think that's the culture that, like I was talking about earlier in terms of the culture, that's the culture that permeates into the workspace. When it permeates into the workspace, you naturally, you will start accepting those changes. Sometimes nobody likes any change, right? Like we would want things to work the way they do, but they don't. Things change. And you'll always see that, you're more adaptable to it when your leadership is more adaptable to it. You're less adaptable to it, and you're less patient with changes when your leadership is not necessarily giving you that signal where if they look frustrated, you think it's right to be frustrated, and it's okay to be frustrated. And I think with digital transformation, there is so much changes that you need to bring, especially if you're not a digital company. There's so many layers of changes that you need across departments, across how you operationalize things. It is very important to have that buy-in and have that willingness to go the extra mile to be able to kind of transform. Because while I've tried to simplify the whole thing, the reality is it is a lot of work. It is not something that happens over 6 months. It takes about 24 to 36 months, depending on how ready you are and how much changes you need to kind of embrace. For instance, for a finance company, for banking, it is even harder because you're dealing with privacy. You're dealing with a lot of information. You just want to be very, very sure of that. It can be in the digital world, and which is the reason why you've seen that retail banking or banking particularly has taken its time. It's gone into digital, but it kind of plays a balance between digital as well as brick and mortar. We still need to sign papers, and we still need to kind of offer documents there. And those are areas that one needs to kind of play with. So which is why it's very important that the leadership kind of gives you a buy-in, and then that kind of percolates into the culture. The tech selection, I think, is obviously bound by the industry you're in. There is a plethora of tech partners that you will have that you can work with. I'm sure everyone's working with Salesforce, for instance, for any CRM requirements. Most of the companies are using Salesforce, but there are specific industry-wide verticals, and for banking it may be different, for media it is different, but you have these different partners that you can work with who will enable those technologies for you. So that's essentially the framework that I usually follow. Now I'll just quickly give you a snapshot of how transformation has happened in some of these industries. These are industries that I'm a little bit more familiar with, so I've chosen them. So if you look at media, for instance, it's very interesting because, 20 years ago, there was a Yahoo and it was a digital company. And I remember nobody kind of, knew what it did. Everyone wanted to know a little bit more about Yahoo. And fast forward to 20 years later, the lines between technology as an industry and media has kind of blurred. Now, I work for a company which is a technology company, but it serves the purpose for media. Media. And in fact, in the last 8 years, all the companies I've worked for are tech companies. So these are SaaS providers. These are these are attribution companies, and this is basically come from. If you look at where they've started, these are companies which are pure play digital companies, but they are basically supporting the media industry and supporting the pivot and the growth in the media sector. Now, there are two kinds of companies, that we are consuming right now. There is a Google, there's a Facebook, which is a pure play digital ink company. So, they thrived in digital. They basically came in the digital ecosystem and built the digital ecosystem. Then there are the likes of a BBC or a CNN or Wall Street Journal. Now, these were newspapers or news channels. They've had to adopt, and become digital as well. And they've done a fantastic job of it over the last 20 years, because how they looked at it is it was just an additional screen. So if I am available through print, if I'm available on television, I'm just offering you an additional screen, which is a digital screen, which could be of various sizes. If you're consuming me on iPad versus a desktop versus your phone, it's all the same, and you just basically create that usability for people to have that content. Now, what that technology has done actually for all of us is it's created personalization and contextualization. Now, what that means is my consumption will be different from individuals here who are also consuming media because they go either on different publishers, different websites, or they consume different kinds of products and different kinds of content. So it is very important to personalize the kind of content that each of us will get gratified by. And that then leads to advertising. So, I'm sure all of us see that if you've gone and visited a product that you wanted to buy and then come out of it, everywhere you go, that product chases you everywhere, right? That's by personalization. We know there is intent to buy, so we will want you to see it more and more. So just in case it will kind of, enables you to kind of do the purchase. And that's the level of personalization that it comes to. Then there is, of course, that also leads to content fragmentation, and that fragmentation is purely from a point of, the kind of content, there may be some of you who likes to go on blogs. There are some people who like video content. There are some people who like only to read content, and some people who will use different devices for different kinds of content. So if I'm watching video, maybe I just wanted to be plugged to my television, which is a smart TV. Or if I'm reading, I want an iPad because now I'm 40 plus and my eyesight doesn't allow me to kind of look through a mobile phone. So that also kind of changes the kind of content I'm consuming, and hence the kind of content that a media owner will show me on different devices when I go. So that it kind of creates that segue there. And what you would have also seen is this rise of influencers, these bloggers. They didn't exist in the old style, old way of doing business. These are new kinds of businesses. This is very, very new. And what it has done is basically some of these media companies have actually partnered with these influencers, these bloggers, and these consumers to create content which they know the consumers want themselves. So there's a certain partnership with the suddenly a consumer has also become a content provider. And that is obviously being accessed through different media channels. And that was only possible in a world that we live in now, which is a very, very purely digitized world. So that's my 2 cents on media. If you look at Internet of Things and the transformation that it has kind of led to, and the way it's kind of moved, typically, obviously there is a lot to be talked about in Internet of Things. But I think the most important piece and the most critical piece here is data. Now, when you look at brick and mortar companies, when you look at traditional companies, they have a lot of data. right? There is a lot of CRM data which is in the physical space. It could be in a finance department, it could be in the marketing department, it could be anywhere, it could be in the sales department. Not the effort is to, through Internet of Things, the effort is to digitize all of that content and all of that data and start making sense of it. Now, when that data gets digitized, you become rich as an organization in understanding your own consumer. And when you look at all of this, right, it all goes back to just one thing. The consumer is at the center of it all, and you're trying to understand your consumer better. You're trying to understand the consumer behavior a lot better. And you have a lot of content which just goes into the digital sandbox. Once it goes into that digital sandbox, then you decide what interpretations you want to make. Do you want to, use machine learning or AI to kind of, make sense of, give you futuristic predictions based on what data you have, or you just want to do an analysis of where you are right now, or you want to look at historical data and say, okay, this is what my consumer is buying today. What is the likelihood he or she will buy this 5 years from now or 10 years from now? And how do I need to kind of evolve from there? So, there are these, so at the base of it all in Internet of Things, it's basically data. And what are we doing with the data? And how are we making sure that it's digitally available and it's been transformed digitally for us to make full use of it? So that's essentially your journey with Internet of Things. And obviously it has to transcend across different departments. You can't say, okay, I'll digitize or I'm in the part of digital transformation, let me just digitize my CRM data. No, you have to look at even my campaign. If I've run a television campaign, I need to know what that translates in a digital world, so I can actually because there's so many tools you can use to just do visual mapping and getting a better sense of how you need to evolve as a company, or how well are you doing? Are you on the right path? Is there something that you need to shift? And I think that's where Internet of Things makes things very, very interesting for us. The third company and a third industry is retail. And I think this one requires the least amount, while this is the most wordy here on the slide, it requires the least amount of conversation, because I think each of us in the last, even if we were sitting on the fence and saying, oh, no, I want to go and buy my own grocery from a shop, we've all kind of shifted completely into online purchase. I, for one, was somebody, I remember this very, very distinctly, because, I was in the digital business, and, a lot of people would say, so are you going to, 10 years ago when, this whole online shopping and everything came about, everyone was like, will you go buy your clothes from an online store? And I'm like, no, I won't, because, it's a touch and feel. You want to try it, you want to test it. I'm not going to buy that, or I'm not going to buy something very expensive online, because I wasn't sure, if I haven't seen my flat screen TV in person, whether what will be delivered will be the same good. So I was very hesitant 10 years ago. Fast forward 10 years later, I think COVID just made it necessary for everyone to say, if you want something, just order it online and figure it out, right? Also, the supply chain changed. Because we've tested it over the years, the user experience evolved, because these companies started getting better at how they kind of worked on their apps or on the website, and it basically, and obviously everything kind of went, I think, 100 times faster because of COVID. All of us have been whether it is buying groceries, buying clothes, buying electronics, all of us are doing that. Like, I just needed a big monitor, I've just ordered it online. And I'm very confident it'll be fine, because the beauty of it is, if I'm ordering it from somewhere and if I'm unhappy with it, I can return it. And that's where I think, digital transformation helps you kind of, go back to the, why it is important, because it brings you closer to the consumer. Now, as a consumer, I am happy because if I can give that person a feedback and say, this wasn't a good product, I don't think I want to pay for it. And I can do that in most cases. And they are taking that feedback. They are making it more and more engaging for the consumer. And they are making it more and more, intuitive decisions. Now, what that is doing, so when you look at it from a seller point of view, so if you look at it from a Lazada point of view or a Shopee point of view, what they're looking at is the lifetime customer value. So who am I? Whatever my idea, and hopefully they do know who I am, because of the fact that we all kind of key in our details. So they would be like, so Sukesh likes these things, and his lifetime value to me is X, Y, and Z, because he bought this or he bought 5 other things. And because of that, it is important to keep for me to keep him happy, because I need this customer for a lifetime. And what will that? And obviously they do these calculations. They know every time you actually, there is so much of an analysis that goes in. Every time you drop off, they do a lot of analysis to understand how to A, bring you back, or B, understand what went wrong and what can we do to solve it, so that somebody like you doesn't go off again. It is again become a very, very competitive space. So, you have a Lazada, you have a Shopee, you have several others. Like Indonesia has some, I think, Brazilian retail companies, which are all online. And I think, that's essentially the whole narrative on the digital transformation journey with retail. There are lots of examples of successful transformations, but I chose two slightly older examples rather than the ones that we're just setting with, and there are lots in the last 2 years. But I thought I just wanted to kind of give a piece of what digital transformation has meant before COVID and how that has evolved. So you look at Best Buy. Best Buy was basically a brick and mortar company. Wasn't doing extremely well, and they used to sell CDs and DVDs back in the day. What they decided is okay, with the whole digital wave, they decided, okay, we'll create a digital store, and we'll not only sell CDs and DVDs, we'll sell more products. Electronics came into it, and the other products that also came into it. But they also did parallelly, and some of us would remember these snail mails. Maybe some of us are that generation who have seen that. So they used to do snail mail marketing, like what IKEA does, but obviously IKEA does a very cool version of it. But this one is where you will get a pamphlet with the product listing and say, these are the things that are available, and it come to you or to your doorstep. They decided to stop doing that and start using digital advertising. Now, what that did is they could then basically do more targeted advertising. So if Sukesh was interested in CDs, then he was only being shown certain CDs. If Adrian was interested in some particular genre of movies, he was only being shown ads of those genre of movies. And they could obviously, do these campaigns with the digital drive. They could actually look at the user behavior and then decide how they want to go with it. And with both these strategies aligning together, the company actually took off really well, and they continue to do fairly well even now. The other story is Microsoft. Now, Microsoft has always been a behemoth, has done extremely well, but there was a time when Apple and Amazon started kind of giving them a bit of a stiff competition. And what Microsoft did is they decided that they have been very futuristic, and they have been able to kind of see things ahead, I would say. And, they have been visionaries, and there's a reason why Microsoft is Microsoft. So what they decided is they said, oh, there's a need for cloud-based systems, and they just forayed into that. So they were known as a software company, and they continue to remain in that business. But what they did is they also pivoted into cloud-based systems. Once they got into that, obviously, it was a journey, and they knew that, it is a journey that they need to kind of go through. And they knew there will be, the need for this will kind of, permeate very, very quickly. And I think over the years, we all see that, everything that we do is on cloud. And, the decision that Microsoft took has paid off really well, not only from a stock price point of view, but also from a point of, elevating the business significantly above everyone else who's kind of, playing in that field, or people who kind of try to come into that business a little later. So that has obviously, been another example. So this is a technology company who's gone into transformation and chosen areas which are not necessarily their, they are a pure play digital company, but they chose an area that they wanted to kind of, evolve into. And that's also part of the digital transformation journey, right? So it's not just about you start with digitizing. How do you kind of up yourself once you are a digital company? So I think this is an example of what Microsoft. My last slide. This I've actually borrowed from Patrick, because I really like this slide. So when you look at the path to digital transformation, it starts with digitization, which is basically converting everything that you have in a hard copy version or in a physical version into digital. Then the next step comes is digitalization, which is basically everything that you have in and around the ecosystem. You basically make it, the processes, everything is, enabled by digital capabilities that you have. And then comes the next step, which is transforming people, processes, and systems to be able to kind of, thrive in once the entire ecosystem has kind of become digital. So yeah, that brings me to the end of my presentation. I have some references which I will share with later. So these are some of the articles or journals that I've read while I was working on this text. So I thought I'll share this as well, and hopefully it'll be useful for everyone. So yeah, this ends my presentation. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take that.
Thank you very much, Sukesh, for that, super interesting, full pack of information presentation. I think we have 2 questions on the chat. These guys open the questions and answers section, but I wanted to start with a little bit of provocative question for you and kind of tapping into your experience. So, basically this is a mentorship program and many of our mentees are here. So what do you think if I'm a student? Of course, I don't look like one, but imagine that I'm a student, I'm about to be, to enter the workforce. I really want to work in digital transformation. So what do you think, what industries and companies in Singapore or ASEAN should be my target list? If you wish, or which ones are the forefront of transformation where I could learn something?
Okay. So if wearing the mentor hat, I would say the first step to getting into the workforce is knowing or aligning with what you want to do. So don't worry about the digital transformation just yet. Identify the industries you want to work with or the roles that you want to do. Now, do you want to get into marketing? Do you want to get into, let's take one example. So if you want to get into marketing, what kind of marketing do you want to do? Do you want to go into consumer marketing? Do you want to go into B2B marketing? What industries are you, more akin with? Because again, all of us are, all the mentees are coming with a certain experience to know where they want to really go, which industries they want to tap into. So I think that should not be tied to digital transformation or digitization, because I think it's only a process for all industries to kind of get to that stage at some point. I think what's important is to take a step back and say, this is what I would like to do, or this is what I would like to try. Once you get to that stage, then you take the next step of saying, okay, I want to get into let's say finance. If I want to get into finance, how do I enable myself, and how do I make sure that I understand what digital transformation means for this particular industry? Because one also needs to remember that digital transformation means different things for different industries, right? And there's, while a media company can go completely digital, it hasn't been possible yet for a finance company to kind of go there and say, I'm completely digital and paperless. And that is because of the way that the system or the ecosystem operates. So keeping that in mind, you need to then kind of, build that awareness in terms of, what that digital transformation means for that industry, and then specifically for the within that industry for the kind of roles that you are interested in. And I think that will help you get a better sense. Yeah.
That's great. I think that leads very nicely to oldie but goldie question, and I think it's from Harish. Harish, are you there? Harish Mittal is in the chat.
Yeah, I saw it. So I see different.
Very much here. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was a very fundamental question. I'm sorry, but I was just, thought maybe in the interest of everyone.
It's the fundamental questions which are the hardest to respond to. So I'll give it a shot. May not have all the appropriate answer for this. But basically, the difference between automation and digitization is, I think, being able to, when you do, I'm just trying to, when you look at automation, right? So automation may be a part of it. It's an outcome of digitization. right? It's not when you're doing, and in some areas you will automate it. In some areas, despite you digitizing it, you don't necessarily automate all parts of the business. And digitization is not just about one single output. Automation is about, a single output. So I've automated this, certain responses or certain areas of my business. But when you do digitization, it is across everything, every sector, whether you have a legal department, whether you have an HR department, whether you have a marketing department, it's all digitized. So it all is kind of, there is a digital footprint of everything that you do. Versus automation, which may work in some areas, which may be required in some areas. It's not always required in every department, right? You don't necessarily need to automate every single report that comes out. Some reports are on demand, right? So I'm giving you a very simplistic example, but I think that's how I look at it.
Sure, thanks.
I see there is how can junior employees influence leadership to transform digitally the company? How do you do it? Any tricks to share? Oh, interesting. I think it's always it's been very interesting. So you always learn from the new blood that kind of comes into the organization. So you also at least personally I can say that about myself, that I'm very curious to see what the kids are doing today. Like if they're on Snap, I want to be on Snap. I want to see what they do. I want to enjoy what TikTok is. I want to understand that. I think that's innately in all of us. And I think if you just look at it, if as an employee, you're able to kind of show those enablements, little enablements that a digital transformation can bring to your immediate boss or to your boss's boss, I think those things are noticed. Those things are picked up. The one thing that I've always seen, and it may be different for different personalities, but more often than not, nobody likes to be told what to do, right? But if you're practicing something and I see it, then I'm like, this is a good idea, or a slightly different way of looking at things. And you can always kind of objectively say, this is something that we can do, and maybe this will work. And it kind of it usually kind of opens conversations if it's an open format of an organization. So I say that's what I would recommend one does. I think how do you prepare yourself to feel comfortable with digital transformation? You'll never feel comfortable with any transformation. So, that's one thing you have to get it out of the head, that any transformation, and it's not just digital. I think what you need to always remember is why you're doing it. Like, like I said, remember the objective. Why are you doing it? You're doing it because you know that your business will grow, your business will thrive. The moment you know that that it is going to offer me that pivot, the learning curve that comes with it is much sweeter, because there is a steep learning curve, right? So if you look at your goalpost, then you will be able to look at it. You look at it very differently, versus when you look at it and say, on its own, it's very hard because I don't know. Just get an expert. You will not be able to do any of it. And the other thing is that at an individual level, you may not be adept, but which is why there are enough organizations outside who basically support you in digital transformation. So identify the partners who are experts. Don't wait for yourself to become that expert. Bring those experts, let them take you up, let them take you through the journey, and it'll all kind of, fall from there. Yes, of course, it's going to be a steep learning curve. It always is for anything that you do new, which is new, right? The only thing I always say is look at the goalpost, look at it objectively and say, this is why I'm doing it. This will get me my next 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, or whatever that is, right? And it is a big motivator, it'll help you kind of get there. But like I said earlier, bring in an expert, bring in people. If you don't have the capabilities in-house, get someone from outside who can give you that guide and will be able to propel that growth rather than, trying to grow organically, because it's a very slow, the business is going, the ecosystem is moving very, very fast, very, very rapidly. So for you to kind of keep pace with it, you need to bring someone in, get up to speed with it, and then let the journey kind of take from there. I hope I've answered the question. Why is Microsoft shift to cloud committing a digital transformation and not just a pivot to different products? What are the key elements that in a digital transformation of product pivot in this space? So the way I look at it is, obviously when you're looking at transformation, it is a product pivot at the base of it all, right? But it's a complete transformation from the way they were doing business. They were in a software business. Then they got into cloud computing, right? It's a cloud business, not a cloud computing, but a cloud business, which is a completely different, it's a completely different pillar that you had to create. So if you weren't and it is also in the digital realm, and they were far-sighted to be able to see it. And that's why I look at it as a digital transformation, because obviously, while you were a software company, you actually looked at something very, very new, and as an opportunity, and created a parallel pillar to it. So it's not an extension of my software business. It's a completely new business, if you really look at it. So which is why I feel it's a transformation more than, because it requires the entire organization to shift at many levels, right? Because the way you do cloud business versus the way you would do software is not necessarily was not necessarily the same thing. It was very different. It's a very different pillar. So if you look at the people in both these streams, they have slightly different skill sets. So which is why I see it as while it can be questioned, but I see it as a transformation.
I think there was another question, I think by Perlene. She wanted you to check to show again the digital pyramid again, the slide.
Oh, okay. Okay, I can just show it to you.
Yeah, that's a nice visual. I'm happy to see it again as well.
Yeah. This is thanks to Patrick. So I won't take any credit for it.
Yep. So if you think about the average Singapore, I don't know how to say this. I'm just trying to, in my head, kind of have a picture of where Singapore job market is for a new entrant. And I know that if, for example, I give you an example. If I like banking and I'm interested in customer service in a bank, how would you rate, where do you think banks in Singapore are in that pyramid right now, based on your knowledge of the industry in terms of digital transformation?
I think I'd speak about it more as a consumer, less as an expert of the industry, because obviously it's not something that I know very well. I think they have definitely gone through the digital transformation journey. If you just look at it as a consumer, the way customer care is handled today, most of it is online. Most of it is through chatbots, right? A lot of it, like our biggest frustration and our biggest problem used to be being on that phone and waiting for someone to answer that call, right? Now, for 50% of your requests, you can just go online and go to a chatbot, and the chatbot is able to actually help. In a lot of instances, that's not a chatbot. In a lot of instances, these are physical people on the other end.
That's funny that you say that. Yeah, because there is someone here today that is doing some kind of work. I don't know if he or she will speak up, but that's why I brought up this example, right? So what is your experience with chatbots, and what do you think about them?
So I think obviously it has its merit. It will get better as we've seen with everything else. But I think from a servicing, these are areas that we've opened up from a point of being able to handle a consumer better, or be able to manage a consumer better. And I think those are attempts in the right direction. Well, can it be improvised? Of course, it can be. Will it be improvised? I am very optimistic that it will be. And that's just one example of it. Now, if you look at transaction today, like it's as paperless as it can be, right? Like most of us are buying, consuming things, and this is all enabled by banks, right? So however, whatever partnerships they may have, it's all been enabled by banks, where you are able to do paperless transactions. You are able to buy stuff online. You're able to pay people. Your PayLah, for instance, didn't exist 2 years ago. It does today. And I think that's when you look at that, the ecosystem is obviously, it's a lot more sophisticated than it was 10 years ago, or even if I go a little further back, 30 years ago, you had to stand in a queue outside a bank to get your money. Today we get frustrated if you have to go to an ATM because like, why do I have to take out cash, right? So if you'll have to look at, like we always say about stocks, right? Like you have to look at a longer term. If you look at a longer term view, then you see that it's not as volatile. It's the same thing when you look at what we were doing 20 years ago to where we are. You see that there is a massive shift, and there's a massive shift in the way digital has been accepted, adapted, and adopted by banks. Obviously, like I said, each industry will have its own trajectory, and there will be areas that one has to work on. But I think largely that's what I see from at least from a finance or a banking perspective.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Are there any other questions? I could keep talking to you, Sukesh, but it seems like a conversation. I think I have to invite you for dinner or something. I'm very curious.
I'm happy to come.
Any other questions? I know that many of you here are in digital or are very interested in digital transformation, and that's why we invited Sukesh to talk. Any questions? Comments?
I think I see one from Jerome. What are significant digital transformation challenges, pitfalls you have faced in your experience? What would you have done differently? Oh, that's a tough one because it's many. So I'll actually it's very interesting. So I'll have to kind of go back into my journey. So when I started my career, I started with a digital company called Yahoo. Now nobody knew what that was. So everyone was very curious about it, but nobody really knew what it did. Nobody knew what an impression was. And you were educating people constantly and trying to tell them that, this is a new world. You can put your ads here, there's a banner, and the banner kind of works. And that was in itself a journey. So, before, sometimes when you're ahead of the curve, the challenge is how do you get your customers to engage with you? Because, they're not there. They don't understand that experience. And they don't know how to evaluate that experience. And that was the first experience that I had. Then fast forward to many years later, you look at the challenges that come with how do you one of the challenges that BBC had, for instance, when I was at the BBC, we had an app, app that a lot of users were very comfortable with. We had a website that users were very comfortable with. Now we did a focus group. And it was a worldwide focus group, and people were like, okay, navigation, this needs to change. This will become more intuitive. This will be this will be that. Now, these are people who've used BBC for all their lives. So 5 years later, when you change the navigation, they don't want that navigation. So it was a much cleaner website. It was a much nicer looking website. But we just got complaints from everywhere. So you're like, did we really have to do this? I remember our consumption dipped a little as well, just because the interface had changed. And actually, the interface had become better. So, so those are things that, even when you're trying to do something with the intent to keep the consumer happy, you don't, there are these areas where you will kind of, you'll struggle with it a little bit here and there. So these are some of the challenges that I remember. If I remember of any other, then maybe I'll separately let you know. We can have a discussion about that. I am interested in this thing. Sorry, I see another question. How do we decide on the amount of budget to allocate for digital transformation? I may not be the best person to answer that question actually. In terms of what budget, I think that will again that actually will depend on what is like. If I look at, the only thing I can give you is an intelligent guess. If I look at a company like cold storage who's trying to get digital and may want to compete with a Lazada, for instance, or may want to be in the same space, may have to invest a lot more because it's more necessary. It's more important and more pertinent for them to be where the consumer is, which is more online. But if it is some other industry, for instance, they may not necessarily. The digital transformation can be slower and it can be paced, so your investment may not necessarily need to be that high. But I will not be the best person to, actually not the most suited to answer this question. it'll have to be an expert from an industry who will be able to kind of guide you there, because there's no one size fits all, basically. Then, another question. Business model. Technical skills. I am not an engineer. I am, and I'm in the industry. I don't think you need technical skills. What you need is technical ability. So you should not be somebody who, who gets cold feet because there's a new technology that comes. You should be somebody who likes to, who enjoys and thrives in new things, new changes, learning new tools. Because I think if you have the learner's mindset, you'll be fine. You should be willing to kind of, the one thing that I've seen, and again, from the day I started my career to where I am today, you constantly, it's like, you're constantly growing a new skill. You're constantly ripping off the old one because there's something new that you have to learn every single day. I've been in the industry for 20 years. And if you ask me questions on media and technology and where it is, I may not know 50% of the things, not because I'm not trying to stay in touch. It's just that it's moving that rapidly. So it's very important to be aware that, you will not know everything, but you will have to be interested enough to want to know as much as you can. And I think that's more important than having technical capabilities, because unless you're looking to become a coder, or unless you want to kind of, work on the technical side, technical capabilities are not that important. What's important is the attitude that you bring to your job. So at least that's been something that I've seen in the last 20 years that I have done this. One follow-up question: how do you accurately gauge consumer behavior and sentiment? We can have. Okay, sorry, I think I skipped a question. Then not changing. No. Sorry, Pauline. This is responding to your question, where you said should we not have changed the interface? No, you still have to. Because at some point in time, the user experience would have, gone down. So you had to change the user interface for BBC. You just had to be, there are certain things that you do knowing that, it will dip for a while, and you'll have to kind of, work in other ways to kind of, keep it going forward, because that was necessary. And while there was a dent in the short term, over the long term, it all kind of evened out, right? So people got used to it, got familiar with it. It's again the same thing, right? Change. We're talking about digital transformation. People usually don't take to change very well. Nobody does, right? And that change is good for you. So over a period of time, you have to just, as an organization, you have to be mindful and you have to be aware what you need to do, how you need to tweak your communication, or how you need to tweak the way you kind of brought the product in front to be able to kind of, ensure that, the changes that the only thing, and in this instance, the reason why I'm saying it was a good thing is because it was very well researched. It wasn't something that, somebody in the organization had an epiphany and said, oh, we must do this. It was actually, there was a very, very long and arduous process to get to that framework. And you see, if you go to BBC today, you see the basically reflections of the same format. So, there are some minor changes here and there, but it's the same format that they finally had arrived at. So no, I would say you should do it. You should experiment. You should try, but do it backed by enough supporting. Don't just, it shouldn't be somebody's whim. It should be decided based on analysis. I know I have one more question. How do you accurately gauge consumer behavior and sentiment? I don't think I'll be able to answer that question. I think again, it's different. It depends. It's not as broad as saying, this depends on where you are. What are you doing? If you're looking at consumer behavior and sentiments, you'll have to look at your product and you'll have to drill down from there. And there are steps to be able to do that. But it's something that will be specific to the category you are doing. Even within, if I look at it, take an example of a Unilever. Even within Unilever, if you're a shampoo category versus a soap category, how you gauge consumer behavior may vary a little bit. And that's how micro one needs to go with it. So it may not be, I may not have an overarching macro view of it. So sorry, I won't be able to answer that question completely. Yeah. Great.
I may, since I know there's 4 more minutes, if I may, maybe an example could be, Mary John, if it's fine, thanks. If the example could be related to the BBC interface, so what kinds of consumer data inputs will you gauge to see, okay, then we should go ahead with changing the interface?
Okay, so the first thing is, you look at the product and, there is enough in the business itself saying, okay, I think, either you've got some feedback, which BBC used to get a lot of feedback from people, like, BBC can do no wrong. And, it's something that it's just ingrained in most of the consumer's mind. So there was anything that if there was any scope of error, it will always be flagged. People are very I think the consumers still are very critical of BBC because BBC is gold standard when it comes to news or any content that they offer. So there was enough feedback that had come in, and this was feedback that kind of filtered from different places, different parts of the world. You cumulatively look at it and you're like, okay, it's only maybe 50 people or 100 people or 200 people. But the organization wanted to kind of pay attention to that and see if there's any learning that comes out of it. That was the first step, because you looked at the feedback and you looked at it seriously enough, even if it wasn't a very large bucket of it. And then you put a group of people from the business saying, okay, does this make sense from usability point of view? These are, again, experts. These are people who are creating layouts. These are people who have created the BBC layout. So it's not a salesperson like me who's going and saying, but you should have the navigation bar left to this or center to that. I'm not capable. I am not the one who's going to be in the room. It's going to be people like people who have created, who has the ability and have the vision to be able to see through feedback that has come. That was the second step. And then they decided, okay, if we want to change, how does it look? So when you work on that, then you obviously go through many iterations, and the teams went through many iterations, identified, created multiple iterations of navigation, and then did focus groups. So with these focus groups were again with people who are avid BBC viewers, right? So obviously you're getting feedback there and then. And then as a summary of it, because you've given many options, you may have 2 or 3. I can't remember whether there were 2 or 3. I wasn't part of the whole thing, but I think there were 2 or 3 options. And then from what I remember, they had to use 2 different formats, and they had to kind of merge it in some form or shape because the kind of feedback they got. If I remember, this is all from memory. This is all distant memory now. But then it kind of that was the next step. Then you kind of start building on it. Then the question is, when do you release it? Right? Because when you release it, there's going to be a bug. All bugs don't get fixed like that. And that people are not very forgiving, right? So people will instantly be like, what happened to the BBC? So how do you kind of, operate in that environment? So all of that, so, you had to do bug fixes, you had to do beta tests, you had to go through a lot of those before you actually went live. And after doing all of that, when you go live, then there are people who are like, what have you done? I can't. Today I woke up and my first thing I do is go to BBC and consume my news, and I don't even know where to find things anymore, right? So it's just those kind of things. And then you kind of, navigate through that, you kind of progress through that. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, you have. Thank you so much, Sukesh.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Wow, it's 12 on the dot. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for some of the tough questions I didn't have answers to, but
yeah, thank you very much for. Yes, very insightful. And, of course, as always, these presentations create more questions than answers. So what's next is that Sukesh will be very kindly, he will share the presentation with us, and we will send to the people who register for this, so we can have access to the additional sources, right, Sukesh, that you listed at the end? Yep.
Yes.
And so that you will receive in an email within the next, I think, 24 hours. And you will be receiving as well a survey. Help us to improve, right? We want to hear from you so we can improve or do our transformation, whatever. We're always transforming anyway. So yeah, thanks once again. Adrian, am I forgetting anything? I didn't have enough coffee this morning. I'm sure I'm forgetting.
Pretty much it.
That's good. So thank you once again, Sukesh, and everybody. Thanks for your questions. And I hope you have a very good Saturday afternoon. Hopefully not so rainy.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for a great session.